One of the most idiotic statements ever. And he said, because kids are afraid to leave their house. Kids are afraid to leave their house because of people like him and people overstating what ICE is doing, not targeting 8-year-old children. They're targeting illegal immigrants. But if you're going to keep saying things like that, that's what's going to keep kids in their house. So this is just ICE acting in a city that already showed that they can't handle it. We saw what happened with the George Floyd riots, and now we see these guys continue to say these are peaceful protests. They're not peaceful protests anywhere.
And let's remind Governor Walz, millions of people were gassed, were killed, murdered, just because they were Jewish. What's happening here, it's a sanctuary city, and ICE is trying to arrest people that have really bad criminal records, and they're here illegally. So Anne Frank was not in her home illegally. She was just targeted because of her religion. Yeah. There's a difference.
Yeah, and look, you know, whether it's Governor Walz or Mayor Frey, clearly they have repeatedly escalated that rhetoric, and that's why people like Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who we interviewed in the last hour, believes that not only have those officials, politicians, filled a powder keg, they lit the fuse for the chaos that created there. But I asked Blanche in the last hour whether or not the rhetoric coming out of DHS, as Bill Maloogian reports the frustrations at DHS, really goes too far when it comes to domestic terrorism on the actions of Alex Preddy. Here's how that went. It does not appear to have met that definition of domestic terrorism. So I'm just sort of wondering how you in the DOJ are viewing whether your colleagues may have gone too far.
Look, I don't think anybody thinks that they were comparing what happened on Saturday to the legal definition of domestic terrorism. What we saw was a very violent altercation, and I am not going to prejudge the facts. You're right. There's a bunch of video that's out there. To the extent there's body cam or other videos that witnesses are still providing to us. So I'm not describing it as anything except for a tragedy. But I do not think it is fair. It is not fair for the narrative to be around something DHS said. It is not fair for the narrative to be around what a video shows over 10 seconds, when the real true story here is something much bigger and much more problematic that the American people have to recognize.
So here's what Donald Trump just told the Wall Street Journal in a 5-minute interview. He says, we're reviewing everything that will come out. We'll come out with a determination. I don't like any shooting. I don't like it. But I don't like it when somebody goes into a protest and he's got a very powerful, fully loaded gun with 2 magazines loaded up with bullets also. That doesn't play good either. So among the people that are concerned, House Homeland Security Chair Andrew Garbarino in New York. He says he has another request for the heads of the CBP and Homeland Security to appear in front of his committee. James Comer, big Trump advocate and supporter, told Maria yesterday that Trump should consider removing some ICE agents from Minneapolis. I would love to see Tom Homan just be asked to go in there and settle things down. He understands the president's objective. He could come in with a fresh set of eyes. For some reason, he's been sidelined of late. And I think we could use somebody to come in there and settle everything down from the Trump perspective.
Donald Trump only spent 5 minutes with the Wall Street Journal, and he answered a lot of questions. That soundbite that you just read, and also when he was asked, he kind of signaled that he might withdraw ICE eventually from Minnesota. He said, at some point we will leave. They've done a phenomenal job. He said, we'll leave a different group there for the financial fraud, because they're also dealing with that in that state.
Well, and, you know, look, ICE will never stop going after violent, illegal criminal aliens, whether it's in Los Angeles, Chicago, or Minnesota in this case, because they're not making a choice to do it or not. They have an obligation, a duty to withhold and carry out our federal immigration law, which is to remove these violent criminals from our country. And that's what the American people want. But to your point, Brian, you know, it is clearly at this point such a chaotic situation, largely created by the rhetoric of the Democratic politicians like Walz and Frey, but it's got to a point where it's difficult to get through it. And I think the president there is indicating that he's willing to do something to try and end the chaos that's happening there.
Brian, is there a way to put ICE, like, let them stay in their hotel rooms and say, okay, let's go get the guy who's 30 minutes away in his house, and then they grab him, and then they arrest him if he's a bad guy. And then they say, all right, the next group, let's go back and regroup, then let's go, because that way they wouldn't have a following and the protesters knowing where they are.
Well, these guys got sophisticated. See, there's a big story on Fox News Digital. I encourage everyone to look at it. Astra Nomari wrote it. Signal. They set up a Signal chat where they were able to stay. They penetrated into the communications that ICE has and DHS, and they're able to follow them just about everywhere around. But the question is, are they going after? They picked up. They say, I think 1,000 over the last 6 weeks. Are there a few more they could pick up and get them out? I know they're looking at a lot of illegal immigrant criminals. But what I thought was interesting, what Bill Malugin said, that some of his sources have described DHS response to the shooting as a case study in how not to do crisis management. We are losing the war, we're losing the base and the narrative. So this is a, it's a wake-up call. The president's objective is great. 600,000 have been deported, 2 million have left on their own. But you don't want to, if the objective fine and no longer people are focusing on the 9 million that Joe Biden left in, they're looking at what's happening in Minneapolis and the 2 people that are dead. And that's not what the president wants, nor does the president want anybody dead just because they're protesting.